Hey, this is Cortland Sutton,
Hey, this is Tim Patrick.
and you're listening to The Snap
with Sidney Jones
on Broncos.
Podcast Network. Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Broncos Podcast Network and YouTube for the latest episode of The Snap. As always, I'm your host, Sidney Jones, and the Denver Broncos are set to head to Las Vegas for their season finale versus the Raiders. So joining me here on today's episode to get us up to speed on the matchup is NFL and Fox sideline reporter Megan Olivi. Megan, it's such a pleasure to have you on the show today. Thank you so much for joining me.
Hey, thank you for having me. It's honestly an honor to be on here with such a great talent, so I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much. How's it going? How's the season been for you?
You know what? It's been great. For me, the season hasn't been as busy as other seasons, but I have a lot on my plate, so it's been great. But this final matchup taking place in Las Vegas, where I reside, has been just a true gift because I just get to drive down the street about 20 minutes to be able to show up for the game. So I think it's awesome. And, you know, Las Vegas is really turning into a sports city. And a lot of times that also means having a huge amount of support for the visiting team in Allegiant Stadium. And so I think that Broncos fans will be pleasantly surprised to see so many of their own jerseys in this Las Vegas Strip area come Sunday.
Yeah, I think it'll be fun. And Broncos fans, they travel well every single week. And I know Vegas is always a fun spot to go. I look forward to it every year since we get to go every season too.
Yeah, I mean, who does like if you're gonna go see your team play and you don't live nearby, like you're probably gonna pick a location and a destination like Las Vegas as opposed to somewhere else.
I completely agree. Well, Megan, I know you've already had a chance to do the production meetings with the Broncos. So who were you able to talk to this week and what did you guys kind of talk about?
You know, we weren't able to talk to a ton of people. Coach Sean Payton is so wonderful with his time, and he really gives us a lot of insight, a lot of depth to his thoughts. So we spent a lot of time with him. We talked to, of course, Jarrett Stidham and then Josie Jewell. And that was really fun because a lot of the guys who are working this game, especially our two play-by-play announcers, they worked with him in college. So that was kind of a fun reunion for them to have. Yeah. And so it's been it was a really nice experience. And, you know, to talk to Coach and just kind of hear where he is at as we approach this final game of the season. Obviously, the playoffs are not in the sights this year for the Broncos, but there was still so much positivity that there was a lot to take away.
Yeah, I know the Broncos are looking to finish the season strong here, you know, finish the year with a winning record for the first time since 2016. Did, you know, Jared, Josie, Sean talk about that, how, you know, they're approaching this game just like any other this season?
I would say that was the number one theme. It was like, get win number 9. That's what every person that spoke to us said. And there was also a big theme of like, hey, we're not taking any sort of day off here. We're not resting anyone. We are playing this game to win, and we're playing it as if there were another step, you know, after this Sunday. And so that was a big theme. It was a sense of not just pride for self, but pride for the organization. And I think a lot of what is this litmus test for the future as well? Hey, yes, we want to be able to say we ended this with a winning season. We want to be able to end this one with a victory, which always feels a lot better going into the offseason than the opposite of that. However, I think that there's a lot of being said about, hey, what does this also say about where we could be next season, and where does it put us when we begin, you know, preparation for 2024?
Yeah, absolutely. I know, you know, quarterback Jarrett Stidham, he's getting a second start for the Broncos this weekend, heading back to Las Vegas where he played the final 2 games last season. You know, head coach Sean Payton, he seemed really pleased with Stidham's poise, his ball security last weekend versus the Chargers. So, Megan, how do you think he could just build off of that in this, really his final opportunity this season?
You know, number one, I think he's really comfortable in the place that he's going to be playing in Allegiant Stadium. I mean, he had his starts for the Raiders there. He's going back there for a third time in his 4 starts in these past 2 years. So I think that's a huge thing, already having comfort in the location and what to expect there. But I think he took a lot from the confidence that not just coach, but also the entire team had in his play last week. I think he's more comfortable with practice reps, but it seemed like a huge positive to be able to understand that somebody of Sean Payton's quality and character and expertise really thought that he was playing like a tested veteran as opposed to someone who is relatively new to the football field in the starting quarterback position role.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, will be a tough challenge going up against this Raiders defense who've been performing really well in recent weeks. And Max Crosby, he's always dominant against the Broncos every time we see him. So what challenges do you really think this Las Vegas defense is going to provide for this Broncos team?
I mean, you just mentioned it, Max Crosby,
Yeah.
right? And, we talked to Jared about that a little bit. Sorry, that's my dog coming in.
Yeah.
We talked to Jared about that. And he said, listen, we were really good friends on the Raiders. He had nothing but high praise for Max as both a player and a person off the field. And he said, I was on the practice squad, so I used to talk all this shit to Max and try to get him to kind of get riled up, but there were no consequences because, I'm here on the practice squad and he's out there, as a starter. And so he said, I am sure that Max is going to try and, prove a point here and try to get at me. And he said multiple times throughout the meeting, we just have to try and control that defense as much as we can. We have to try and control Max Crosby, or at least keep him at arm's length as much as we can. So I think that's going to be something really fun to watch because of the relationship that they have had already. And of course, Max Crosby is Max Crosby, right? Like he does what he does at the highest level in the NFL. He's so thrilling to watch. But I think knowing that there's this little personal degree is going to be great as well.
Yeah, and Megan, on the other side of things here in Denver, this Broncos defense has made quite the turnaround this season. I mean, they're allowing just over, I think, 18 points per game since week 8. They have 2 Pro Bowlers in their secondary. What are your just expectations for them going up against this Raiders offense who's kind of been struggling the past few weeks?
I think you just nailed it, is they really turned things around, and obviously credit to Vance Joseph and what he has been able to do with this defense and how those players really rely on Vance and believe in what he is asking of them on the field. And so you mentioned those Pro Bowlers, and obviously, they're going to play a huge role here as long as everyone is healthy and able to play in this game. I think that there's a lot to be stopped. Is Devontae Adams playing? We don't know. There's a lot going on with who the Raiders are going to start. But I think for this Broncos defense, not only is the future very bright, but Sunday is very bright for their capabilities and what they will be able to do against this Raiders offense.
Yeah, definitely. Megan, kind of going off of that, I know you haven't had production meetings with the Raiders yet, but how do you think the Raiders are just going to approach this final game, them having been eliminated from playoff contention too? And I know the Broncos, they've lost 7 straight games to the Raiders too.
Yeah, I think they're having a very similar approach that, hey, we are playing for pride. We're playing for the organization. We're playing for our fans. They've mentioned that, I've seen in a lot of media, hey, these people pay a lot of money for these hard-earned tickets. We owe it to them to give it to our best. But also, I do believe they're playing a lot for the future of Coach Antonio Pierce. There's so much support in the building for him to obtain that permanent position as the head coach. You've heard players talk about it throughout these past couple of weeks, been very vocal. This is the man that they want in that role. And I do think with a great outing, they feel like they might be able to solidify that a little bit more than, say, a poor showing. So I think not only is it about pride and professionalism and personal goals, and of course, I used to work with Aqib Talib, who said, hey, they're playing for the bag. Whether they're in the playoffs or not, they're playing for their own bag and their own contracts. But I do think a lot will have to do with their hopes for Coach Antonio Pierce.
Yeah, definitely. And you can see the difference in the culture, the attitude over there since Antonio Pierce has taken over for sure. Well, Megan, I really appreciate your insight on the matchup. But before you go, I want to switch gears for a bit here. As many of my listeners know, one of my main goals here on the Snap is to highlight women's impact in and around the NFL. So I want to ask you about your career. Can you just tell me a little bit about what your role with Fox entails?
Yeah, sure. So I am sideline reporter. I am Team 7. So I've been really fortunate. This is my 6th season with the NFL on Fox. The way I got this role is I was working, I still work for the UFC. That is my main role. I am the lead broadcast reporter there. And, we were partners with Fox. That's who aired our fights. And one year they needed somebody to fill in on a game. And they said, hey, we're going to give you a shot. You've done a great job for what you do with UFC. Don't mess up, essentially.
Right.
And yeah, I got a game, and then I got a bunch more. And so it's been 6 seasons, and I'm eternally grateful. It's very different from what I do on a normal basis with the UFC broadcast. And so to be able to just flex different muscles, but at the end of the day, the NFL, this is America's sport. This is what America is doing on Sundays, and to be able to play a very small role in that, feels very special. And so it's an honor that I don't take for granted. Whenever I'm assigned a game, I do whatever I can to make sure I'm putting all of my heart and soul into my knowledge and my research and the way I am telling these stories on air. And so it's been a really great journey. NFL and Fox, in Fox Sports, they're just a brilliant company to work for. And I feel very fortunate to be able to be, a player in this whole atmosphere of the NFL on Fox and just NFL coverage in general.
Yeah, you mentioned, flexing different muscles when covering NFL versus UFC. What's kind of the difference between, interviewing maybe fighters versus football players?
When it comes down to that, I always say like athletes are athletes and they all have the same competitive fire. I would say the difference is like a lot of times I interview fighters on Friday and Saturday. So Friday they weigh in, Saturday they compete. On Fridays, unless they're a heavyweight, they're a cutting weight. So they're hungry, they're tired, they're thirsty. So that's a little bit different than an NFL player who's eating real good, But
Less cranky.
yeah, exactly. But I think that competitive fire is the same for both of them, and you kind of know when you walk up to somebody, okay, this is an athlete at the highest level. You might not even know what sport they participate in or whatever, but they just have this aura about them, or the way that they speak about whatever is in front of them. It's very evident and obvious. And so in terms of the interviews, they're very similar. It's just like the broadcast responsibilities that are different for me with UFC. But it's for me, it's always just fun to get to the core of who these athletes are like as human beings and find out what makes them tick, or how the heck did they get here.
Right.
And so for that, for me, being able to do that storytelling for athletes across the board is really great.
You mentioned 6 seasons with the NFL. How many years have you been doing UFC now?
Oh, so this is my 10th year with the UFC.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it has flown by. Prior to that, I did a couple of years of UFC coverage before they actually got a television deal. And so, yeah, it's been, I would say, almost 15 years of my life in sports broadcasting, and I wouldn't change a thing. And, the landscape is ever changing, but as long as the details, in my role are dialed in, and I'm doing whatever I can to present, the best whole story. We just roll with it, whether it's broadcast, whether it's streaming, wherever in the world these things take place. We just have to kind of roll with the punches and continue to evolve as the rest of the coverage does.
Absolutely. As things change by the minute in sports in this industry, for sure. Yeah, Megan, can you kind of walk me through what that path has looked like to get to where you are today?
Yeah, I went to college at Seton Hall University in New Jersey. I did not have any indication whatsoever that I wanted to do this. I was a sports lover. I always say the first love in my life was the New York Yankees. And so I grew up watching the Yankees, grew up watching the Giants. And I was an intern my sophomore and junior years of college in New York City. And some of the guys would be like, you talk to us about the Yankees and the Giants every day. Like, why aren't you doing something in sports? And it had just never occurred to me. It wasn't that I didn't think I could do it. I don't know. It just wasn't even an option in my brain. And then I started kind of looking into it and realized, as a year or two went by, I was junior, senior in college, like, hey, I can't just, be a political science major. I need to have something to back this up, because there's a lot of people who want to do what I now have decided I want to do. So I got my master's at Fordham University, and then I got offered a job in Las Vegas, where I didn't know anybody, which was like 2,500 miles away from all of my friends and family. And I figured I'd give it a try. I gave myself 1 year. If this doesn't work out, I can move back. And, I was like super, super poor, living beyond paycheck to paycheck in New York City. So I'm like, I can go back to that, no problem.
Right.
And yeah, I never looked back. I started covering the UFC because they didn't have a TV deal. So we were kind of like their partners in coverage. And then one thing led to another. I got, asked to join the UFC as an official staff member and work officially for them. And then with our different TV deals, I've worked with Fox. Now the UFC is on ESPN. And so I'm one of the really fortunate broadcasters that gets to work with these two huge networks that do so much in the sports space, and they do it at the highest level. So yeah, it's just been, it feels like when you're in it, it feels so long and impossible, and like you're not really getting anywhere. But then you look back and you're like, oh, wait, no, I did swim the length of, this ocean where I really thought I was treading water. Yeah.
Well, last one here for you, Megan. I like to finish these episodes just inspiring the younger generation. So what's one piece of advice you'd give someone who's looking to get into this industry, really no matter what area of it they want to work in?
Yeah, I would just say, stay true to yourself. If you believe that you can do something, have that self-belief and then work towards it. Don't let anyone ever say that it wasn't because you weren't informed enough or you didn't work hard enough. Control the things that you can control, which is the information that you take in, and how hard you dedicate yourself to that goal, that dream. And so stay true to yourself throughout that. There's a lot of things that go on around, these worlds where you're like, oh, maybe this is a shortcut or whatever. just stay on the path, the tried and true path, and never let anyone say that you didn't work as hard or you weren't as informed or you weren't as educated as you could be. Never give anyone else an excuse. And there you will hear a lot of no's, but just continue to press forward. If you do things the right way, things will work out.
I love that. Stay true to who you are. That's perfect. Well, Megan, I truly can't thank you enough for joining me today. It's been such a pleasure.
Oh my God, it is my pleasure. Thank you so much. You are so talented and keep doing what you're doing. I think it's really, really important to hear from women in these spaces where there's not a lot, but they're certainly making a difference and working so hard. So you being one of them. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you in Vegas this weekend.
Yes, let's go.
That's going to do it for this week's episode of The Snap. Broncos Country, thanks so much for tuning in all season long. And thank you again to Megan Olivi for joining the show. Make sure to meet me right back here on the Broncos Podcast Network and YouTube on Monday for a game recap.